These philosophies shook the Western worldview like an earthquake and opened a new period that dominated Western music, architecture, economics, sociology, psychology, magic, religion, music, and literature. From 1890 to 1922 is the period which is called as the early modernism or paleo-modernism, and from 1922 to 1945 is the later part of modernism, which is also called as the high modernism. Early modernism is found mainly in the form of movement which are called as the avant-garde movements. Avant-garde, something very new, drastically new that one cannot imagine, such as number one is Dadaism. Dadaism is founded by the Romanian poet in 1917 in Zurich. It is a nihilistic movement by Tristan Zara, and it believes in the negative philosophy of life. It believes in absurdity, scandal, and subversion of human life. Dadaism is characterized by man's madness, where restoring the lost purity has become difficult. The next avant garde movement of early modernism is Surrealism. In 1915, this movement grew directly out of Dadaism. Andrea Breton, under the influence of Freudian philosophy, stated or started this movement. This is to go beyond realism. It believes that psychological or mental fantasy is greater than the reality in human life. Fantasy should never be dismissed. When the human mind is reality, fantasy also is a reality. Surrealism exploits dreams, fantasy, hallucinations, mental sicknesses, psychological problems, and document them in the human expression of literature as well as art. The third avant garde movement in early modernism is Futurism, followed by Cubism. Futurism and Cubism are the minor movements of the age. Futurism is a literary movement originated in Italy in 1910. Under the influence of Filippo Tomasco Marinetti in painting, it means a poetry of motion whereby the painted gesture should become actually a dynamic condition. The figures in the picture or the words in literature express the state of mind of the painter or the artist. Futurism is to liberate art from traditionalism. Cubism, on the contrary, is a collage of art or painting. So, Cubism and Futurism become the avant garde movements, along with the next movement called Symbolism. Symbolism and imagery are to create mental pictures through words. These were the pathfinding movements, and modernism expresses the rationality, rather, the lamentation over the loss of past unity, rationality, center of authority, reason, and logic. Moreover, early modernism had an affinity with the mass art. It was feel, felt that low or high art or mass art and class art should be fused together. Then we move ahead to the high modernism between 1922 and 1960. Early modernism gave way to high modernism where movements were replaced by individual texts. High modernism began with the publication of James Joyce's text, Ulysses, in 1922, and also T.S. Eliot's very famous text, The Waste Land, almost in the same year, 1922. High modernism theoretically agreed to and accepted the existence of mass art. It looked for the depth, as it is in everything. High modernism is found in the writings of Mosca, William James, Freud, Bergson, Virginia Woolf, Malam, Brecht, Tristan Zara, and so on and so forth. Roughly speaking, the following are the salient features of modernism. They agreed and accepted death, destruction, war, chaos, as we find in Moscow, William James, Freud, Bergson, Ezra Pound, Pablo Picasso, Brecht, Wolff, and others. The salient features of modernism could be talked about as number one, it is about novelty or newness in artistic practices. Number two, it is radical and violent break in politics and political change. Number three, it is the same thing that cut apart from the mass culture. Modernism is opposed to bourgeois social realism or surface realism, and hence, as a fourth point, it is in search for depth. Number five, modernism believes in search for inward and the psychological. Therefore, it replaces the social realism with the psychological realism, and it is a challenge to the beliefs. Number six, modernism believes that nothing is wholly said about human experiences. Fantasy in is itself reality. Search for the unconsciousness, search for the structures, search for the expression of these symbols or the unconscious is the appropriate symbols and imagery is what it believes. Modernism is not concerned with content or form, but with the medium itself, and the abstractness at all levels is being observed. Modernism is a philosophy which believes the fancy and dreams are promoted. The unconscious expression through symbols and images is observed. Abstractness is appreciated all through. It nourishes nihilism and pessimism and searches for subjective expressions. Modernism is a philosophy that nurses nihilism and pessimism about the entire world. So, poems like The Wasteland become the key texts of this period. It also is a search for subjective expressions, and therefore, the subjective experience is filling the gap between the outer as well as the inner, and hence it is characterized by a sense of alienation. As a dominant theme of the modern literature, as part of nihilistic agenda, modernism also introduced existentialism and the literature of the absurd. Alienation at all levels. And the question of existentialism in this world is being the question of literature as well as art belonging to modernism. The theater of absurd has developed because of this modernistic inquiry. In criticism, it promotes objective analysis just like structuralism promotes. It becomes the manifest through the formalistic schools of critical thought and structuralism and linguistic criticism. So, modernism is a period of revolutionary ideas and program in the intellectual field of the West. It is an intellectual excavation of the Western thought in the entire 20th century, or rather the middle of 20th century. Postmodernism, to a larger extent, is a cancellation of the modernist thought and practices, and hence postmodernism is not a complement to the modernism by a larger extent. In this video, we talked about what modernism is. In the next video, let us explore what postmodernism is. Thank you for being a part of this video. Bye for now.